Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the I'm Sara Pantulian. I'm the Chief Executive here at the Institute. And I'm really pleased to have such a diverse audience here tonight, also online, because I've seen who is joining us online. I think everyone who is in this room agrees with me that global challenges need local solutions. And I think it's for this reason that we are particularly pleased to work so closely with so many mayors and so many cities. We know that by 2050, 2/3 rather, of the global populations will be in urban centers. And we believe that cities are actually the real engine of social and economic development. That's why we do so much work on urban development. We work on so many different dimensions of these agendas. And that's why we are delighted to have with us Mayor Sala tonight. We hosted Mayor Bensouda from Kanifing, the Gambia, just a few months ago. We were also very pleased to be in Freetown with Mayor Aki Sawyer back in December. It was actually Marta that was there on our behalf to launch the City Fashion Design and Creative Arts Network. I'm sure we'll hear about it later tonight. But generally, ODI has a big global platform. But we're really pleased to be able to use these platforms to give voice to city leaders, to really hear more, what they can teach national leaders, what they can offer, what we can learn, and what we can facilitate in terms of exchanges between mayors, but also between mayors and national leaders. We're doing, as I said, a lot of work on urban development, but we are particularly proud of supporting and hosting the African Europe Mayors Dialogue because it plays such an important role, particularly now. The relations between the two continents may not be the most cordial and harmonious. For those who are not aware, the Mayors Dialogue is a platform of more than 20 African and European mayors. It is co-led by Freetown and Milan, in fact, by Mayor Sala and Mayor Aki Sawyer, and is really focused on providing innovative, practical solutions for inclusive growth and sustainable development for and between the different cities that are in the network. And the network does include cities like Accra, Amsterdam, Lisbon, Dakar, Durban, Kampala, so a lot of very important, prominent cities. And I think the mayors of these cities are really demonstrating some serious and inspiring, I would say, political leadership, and really building a more equal relationship between our continents based on mutual respect and mutual trust. And that's why I do think national leaders have something to learn, and why we are so proud at ODI to be able to support the endeavors of the Mayors Dialogue. And we're really looking forward to listening to the reflections that Mayor Sala is going to offer us tonight. Thank you very much for being with us at ODI. The conversation will be led by Marta Foresti. Marta is a long-standing colleague, friend, leader to ODI, now with us as a visiting senior fellow. She's also been one of the creators of the Mayors Dialogue, and she's continuing to lead us together with ODI. And we're listening to your conversation with a lot of interest. We'll open up to the discussion after the initial sort of exchange between Marta and Mayor Sala. But with that, I'll give the floor to you.
Thank you, Sara. Thanks, everyone. First off, it's a bit of an Italy night tonight, so that's why, as you can see, we have managed to coordinate ourselves. It's quite funny. I walked into the room earlier, and there was this very big red chair. I sat down, and you looked absolutely terrible.
You disappeared.
I disappeared. Somehow I disappeared. So we managed to pull off this little Italian flag. They're not just Italians working at ODI, although they are very well represented tonight. We are truly global, although we are slowly taking over. So it is a delight to have you all here. And it is a delight to have you, Sindaco, with us tonight. We're going to hear a little bit about Milano, of course, and a number of you don't know Milano that well, so I'm sure you're curious to know. But then we're really going to focus on why Milano and why the mayor works so closely with mayors across borders and all over the world, and specifically with African mayors. Sara already mentioned how important cities are And I always joke with some of my colleagues here, people who work in global development, let's say, tend to focus a little bit too much on the nation states. And like my colleague Mark, for example. But really, cities matter. But in addition to this overall figure that maybe didn't surprise you all, that so many people will live in cities, out of the 20 fastest cities in the world, 17 are African, and 4 of them are in Nigeria. So we're going to finish this conversation focusing very much on Africa. So we start with Milan and with Africa and African cities, and that's where I am particularly proud to be supporting the city of Milan in this job. Let me tell you a few things about Mayor Beppe Sala. We met a couple of years ago when we started this Mayor's Dialogue. Mayor Sala was not a politician before he became mayor. So he stood for election in 2016 and he was re-elected with a resounding majority in 2021. But before standing for office, he was leading companies such as Pirelli and Telecom Italia. He was the city manager of the municipality of Milano. And then he was very well known in Milan because in 2015 he led the Expo in Milan, which was, those of you have heard probably that Milan is a very nice city these days and is much better than it used to be. I think the Expo is where it all started, right, this Renaissance. And so you were, associated with this. And then you decided after that what you wanted to do was to stand for mayor, and I'm going to ask you why. But the last thing I want to tell you about Mayor Sala is that he's a very accomplished road cyclist, like me, and that one day we will manage to do one of those climbs of the Giro di Lombardia, and I will probably beat you. But before that, Mayor Sala, why did you decide to stand for mayor, and why did you decide to stand again after 5 years?
The second question is
I know.
it's really tricky. Thank you for the invitation. Good evening, everyone. There is the guilty is Expo, because at that time I met Ricky Bardette, for instance. I met a lot of people, and I understood the potentiality of the city of Milan, and even the attitude, the behavior, the hope of the Milanese, because we want to be European, we want to be international. For instance, if a Milanese citizen decide to leave Milan, it's because he want to go to live to London, New York, not to Bologna or Rome. I don't want to seem arrogant, but the quality of services in Milan, even with all the problem, and I will mention the problem later on, give to our city a different positioning in Italy and in the world. So the guilty is Expo, because I understood that the city was, let me say, surfing a quite good condition, but we understood the opportunity with the Expo. And I could tell you for some hour what is to organize an Expo, and all the problem, all the criticity, discussion, the polemics, and then you do and you make the Expo. But finally, we had 21 million visitors, 7 million from abroad. And the people in Milan believe that the present success is given to Expo. It's a little bit different. The Expo was something that allowed our quality to be showed, to be conscious. For instance, I want to give you only one example. We have 80 universities plus 3 academies with 220,000 students out of 1.4 million inhabitants. We are a university city. But before the Expo, even our university were prudent. So they were used to host people from South Italy. They were starting to receive people from everywhere in the world. So that was true for universities, for creativity, fashion, design, industry, and so on. It's like in a moment we understood our potentiality. And that is the reason for which I decided to run. Not easy for me because, I mean, after 25 years in the private sector, you know, in the private sector it's totally different. You decide you want to hire people or or consultant. It's very simple. In the public sector, and mainly in the Italian public sector, is quite complicated. But I decided the first time I won, let me say, for 3-4 points. So I won at the ballot, the second at the ballot with 52%, and my competitor at 48%. The city, I cannot say if Milan is left or right. Let me say a moderate right. But probably for my past, for my, I mean, even in my image, I got votes from left and right, more or less everywhere. While the second mandate was easier, because I won at the first vote with 58. Of course, I had many doubts. There is one reason for which I decided to run again, and the reason is COVID, because it was impossible to leave the city at that time. During the COVID, when the people stayed home, or most of the bourgeoisie in their houses in the mountain and the sea, and sometimes I still met people who tell me, "Oh, what a wonderful time during the COVID! I was in St. Moritz." But I mean, we were hit early and hard, and at that time, I mean, it was impossible to say, "I wake up." And here I am. Now, the first mandate takes 5.5 years due to the COVID. It was prolonged. And then I discovered that if you are elected in the second semester, you go to the 6th year. So at the end, with the 2 mandates, I will manage the city for 11 years, which is a long time.
Let me stop you there, because I want to ask you something specifically about that, but also I want to pick up on the fact that, you know, us Milanese are quite famous for being very humble, right? And so I like the way you said that, you know, nobody from Milan will ever go and live in Bologna. We might, you know, some colleagues might take issues. And all these people during COVID hiding in St. Moritz is also very
No, but
nice
it's the reason, sorry, not it's the reason for which I'm here, because again, I don't want to seem arrogant, but if I want to learn, I cannot go to Rome or, it's very simple. I go to, I come here, I go to Paris or...
Let's come back to that. I'm sure that will be picked up in the conversation. But let's go back to this mandate that you said is likely to be around 10 years. That's a lot longer than an average Italian government. And even these days, even in this country, they've experienced short-lived national government. So that means that you are that rare breed of a politician now that has a long mandate and has time and has a long-term perspective. What does that mean for your priorities for the cities? How have they changed given this long-term mandate that you now have?
One of the few good reforms we made in Italy is the election, the system for the election of the mayor, because you manage the city for 5 or 10 years. Remember that in Italy, after the Second World War, so in 77 years, we had 71 governments, which is terrible. It is terrible. It was terrible, but now it's really terrible in a period where you had to manage having a long-term vision. So in 10 years, 10 or 11 years, you can modify many issues. Again, I don't want to undervaluate some problem we have in Milan, or I mean, like in the main cities, like security. The common debate is around security. The city is unsafe, it's insecure. I know, but let me say, more or less like most of the big cities. we have, in reality, we have a couple of problems. One is cost of living associated to the scarcity of affordable apartments, which is a problem even if you go back to how many students we have, for instance, it is a problem. And I believe from a political point of view that the cost of living is a tremendous problem, but we should look also to the revenues, because now with the inflation the salaries are flat and the costs are going up. So we cannot work in like in a company, like in a private company. We cannot look only to the cost, but in the company you go to the revenues. And here we had to look to the salary. In Italy, these salaries are very poor. So even from a political point of view, I have to work on that. But forgetting for a while. Point number one is cost of living and apartments. One of the reasons for which I will meet Sadiq Khan tomorrow is this. We have 70,000 public apartments. They are, given to the poor people, and the poor people get those apartments due to the salary, again, how many children, or if they have disability. What is missing? Is missing an intermediate level, which is not the old public house. It is something different, but let me say it's missing something for which you pay 600 euros per month. How to face the problem? Number one, when we give a permission to build something new, we ask the real estate company to leave 30% for social housing, or let me say with conventional pricing. This is number one. Then we are trying to give let me say a different opportunity to who build houses for students, for university students, or we are working on the fees to build according to the quality of the investment, and if you are in the center you pay more, if you are in the peripheries you pay less. Okay. But this is the main problem. Second problem is, again, the reason for which I'm here, environment, the quality of the air, and mobility. Starting from a very simple but fundamental number, which is now in Milan we have 52 private cars per 100 inhabitants. It is nice that if I ask in London which is the number, probably no, it's not known, but I mean, according to any analysis, we should go down to 40 to limit the traffic and to have good for mobility. And the way is composed by two main parties. One is giving more opportunity, so telling you why you want to use the car, use the public transport system, and again prolonging the metro lines to the peripheries, building new metro lines, buying new electrical buses, and so on. The other one is to the rules to avoid that the most polluting cars enter in the cities, or the congestion charging, and again I'm here in London to learn so how they are proceeding.
So you mentioned already that you're here to meet Mayor Sadiq Khan. You mentioned housing, transport, climate and air pollution. I guess there is something in there in the next thing I want to ask you, which is why, as a mayor of an Italian city, you're investing so much energy and political capital, I imagine, collaborating with mayors globally. I would imagine that for a mayor, the best, sort of the most efficient way to maintain political popularity is to work very much on local issues. But you are a mayor well known for being very engaged globally. So, you know, it's the work with C40 on climate, the works with the Mayor's Migration Council, the work that we do on Africa Europe. So why do you do that?
There are a couple of reasons. Number one is to learn, which is, I mean, I cannot, and the only low emission zone in Italy is in Milan. So how is possible to learn for the future? So that's the reason for which I come here or Paris. Second reason, which is not, which is fundamental, because as the people in Milan say, I am an international guy, I wanna be, I love Europe, I love the world. If I tell the Milanese, yay, I'm going there because the main cities in the world are going there, it is easier. And that is one of the reasons for which I am fully committed with C40. Because if I can tell the story, if I can tell the story and can tell, look at London, okay, they face problem, but they solve part of of those problems, it is easier for me. So for me, and even for my reputation, it is better to say, I'm going there because I'm in a consensus in a system where the other main international mayor are going. Okay. That is the reason. So practical and even from a political point of view, having the, let me say, the C40 brand or having many, or if Sadiq can say he is a good guy, fundamental for me.
Okay, that's a very good segue to what we're going to move on to next. So we've been to Milan. You've all understood that Milan is a wonderful place. Why you engage with London and Paris, but of course you also engage with African cities, and actually some of not necessarily the biggest African cities, which I imagine are quite different from Milan. But before we move to this last part of the conversation on Africa, let's hear from a friend of yours who happens to be an African mayor. So can I please have the video?
My dear brother mayors, Sadiq and Pepe, so glad to know you're together and that you're working on a common interest. The Mayor's Dialogue is such an important conversation, really creating opportunities for partnership and collaboration as we address significant issues such as migration and job employment for our youth. Last year, I had the pleasure of visiting Pepe in Milan and putting into motion some of the elements of what has now resulted in the launch of the Freetown Fashion Designers and Creative Arts Network, a network which is seeing our young designers exposed to international markets. And Sadiq, last year, we had 4 of our designers in London working with a Sierra Leonean-born, London-based major fashion name, Lambron Designs. This is the start and an example of what can be achieved. Those designers are now working in a broader context to build their businesses, improve on their production, and importantly, access markets, starting in Milan, but no doubt going beyond. And this means jobs for our young people, sustainable jobs, which help them stay in country and provide alternatives to irregular migration. This is not where it ends. We see so many more opportunities. And I'd like to say a big thank you to Marta Forezzi for all that she's done to help us push forward this partnership and collaboration within the dialogue.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Yvonne. It's always nice to see her on screen. Ivona Kisora is the mayor of Freetown, and of course she's talking to Mayor Sala and Mayor Sadiq Khan because she knows that you're going to meet tomorrow. So why Africa? Given that the reason must be a bit different from the one you just mentioned earlier about what you're learning from Milan and Paris. Why is it important for you and for Europe more broadly?
Well, of course, first of all, there is a political sensitivity and a political approach, and for the left, I'm a Democrat. I cannot forget a problem which is a global problem. But then there are also some practical reasons. Number one is also the geographical positioning of my country. We are so close to Africa, so it's natural. Second reason, I see that it is difficult to, to explain or to make an example here in London, which is a complete melting pot. But in Italy, we have only let me say 9% of foreign born, and in Milan 20%. But Milan is working better than the country. And even from a political point of view, I want to tell the Italians, we can do that. Of course, integration is not simple. Of course, there is a price. And let me say, the most complicated price is paid with the Africans for many reasons. But there are some very useful cooperation, and mainly between the city, because the city can make a partnership of equal. Having in mind what Yvonne said, she mentioned fashion. Okay, Milan is the city of creativity, fashion and design. And the fashion industry now is not only selling a jacket or a shirt. They are selling an experience. They are selling an idea. They must work on sustainability. So we are making some, let me say, a sort of triangle between Milan, Freetown, and our fashion industry. They are experiencing in Freetown, they are teaching in Freetown, and again, this is creating new jobs, but also it's creating an experience. So imagine if you move from fashion to design to other sector. It is fundamental. I was degree the Bocconi University in economy in the very far 83, but in the 60s, my university make an experience, an experiment. So Bocconi financed some African student and paid different times, and paid for, let me say, some 30, 40 African students, 5 years in Milan, paid everything. After that, of course, choosing according to experience, quality. After that, we saw that one became a president of Gambia, the other one Minister of Finance in another country. So it's a good investment, and their relationship with Milan was incredible. So it's not a question to be good. It's a question of let me say, vision for the future. You told us before, the biggest cities will be African. So for all this reason, it's natural. Then there are also, let me say, personal reason. When you find people like Yvonne, it is easier to work. There are many reasons. But again, if I can do that because I work with you, I work with the C40, and again I come back to your question. It's a question of sensitivity, but I believe that for myself, but mainly for my city, I can add advantage to be open and with this international approach.
Thank you. That's great to hear, and is a real potential that we have working with cities to really charter this idea of seeing the practical and the investment potential, and the work that we're doing in fashion, in design, and in other creative sectors, and the green blue economy is really very practically showing that we can break down this very toxic narrative that often dominates the way we talk about Africa and Europe. How well are you getting on with the national government in Italy with this idea?
No, first of all, as I told you before, it's not easy to stay in a good relationship with the government that are always changing. because in Italy we have a tremendous spoiling system, and the new governments, new offices, new administration, and you had to restart from scratch every single time. So this is a complication. With the new government, I give time to that. I don't want to say they are to give a negative, to say something absolutely negative. Of course, I see many risks. First of all, I don't know if the world is still divided in the political world in left or right, but for sure it is divided in conservative and progressive, and they are very conservative. So they have in mind Italy of the 70s. This is my perception, of course. Then we will work. I need them because I cannot. The fiscality in Italy is very poor for the municipalities. I give the example of the public transport. So with the tickets, we cover only 41% of the total cost. So I need the government intervention. Now we are seeing a debate which is not focused on the future of the city, of the country, which is not focused on the industrial strategies. This focusing on the justice, which is the problem. It is focused on some ideological issues. So I want to give them time. Of course, I doubt. But I doubt. Let me say very frankly, we lost the election because they won, but we lost. And now, to explain in 30 seconds, which is the left in Italy. The left is the Partito Democratico. According to the last poll, the Partito Democratico, Rick, is 14%, only 14%. Then there is the Movimento the 5 Stars, which is they got let me say 30% in the south and 2% in Milan, but they now have 18%. And then there is let me say a moderate left, but the moderate left say I cannot stay with you, Partito Democratico, if you stay with them. And the other guys of the Movimento 5 Stelle say to them, I cannot stay with you if you stay with this third pole, which is a disaster. So my bet is that they will manage the country for 5 years, probably changing government, but we are the loser. We are the loser.
Fascinating conversation with Sadiq Khan tomorrow. Thank you, Mayor, also for being so open and so frank. One of the loveliest things about working with mayors is that you really get the real deal. You get the real story about how it is. And just a reflection, this idea that we constantly struggle to put together what works locally and what works globally. I think you just heard that cities all struggle with very similar issues: housing, transport, demographic change, rapid changes in populations. But also that is one way of thinking about the global aspect, the linking up, the common experience. And I'm very glad that you mentioned learning as the first thing that you want to do by working with others. Let me open the floor to questions in the room. We have a few people listening online, including my dad, who is, of course, in Milano and probably has a couple of questions, and I'm joking. Let's try not to have too many questions focused specifically on Milan. This is a global audience, so let's perhaps focus on Milan as a global city and working with mayors across the world and with African mayors in particular. You can have the screen with the participants and questions in the room, and we have a mic. Thank you, Laia. Please. Can you also introduce yourself when you do? Thank you.
Hi, hello. My name's Tony Travers from the London School of Economics. So thank you very much for the invitation and the discussion. I mean, obviously you have an image for Milan, which is to make it open, internationalist, more diverse global population living there. Now, and London, as you say, is very like that itself. But to the point that its scale and difference and success has become resented inside UK politics. The very fact it's so economically powerful, so different to the rest of the UK, the most obvious factor is that immigration has turned London schools from being the worst in the country to the best within 20 or 30 years. So in some ways, London has massively benefited, well, in many ways, and almost always, massively benefited from immigration and economic growth. But as I say, to the point where the rest of the country doesn't quite understand it at best. So, I mean, do you have a sort of thoughts as to how you're going to cope with that if you're as successful as you doubtless will be in turning Milan into even more of a sort of global and economically successful city?
Oh, you're right, because we are already seeing part of the problem related to this change, and let me say, from one hand, when the people from South look at Milan, they see a successful story. Normally, they have a son, a cousin living in Milan, and they tell when they go back to Bari or to Puglia or to Naples, they tell them how good is, how nice is to live on the Milan. In the meantime, they consider us less like, I mean, it's not a reference. It's something that it cannot reachable. And that is a problem, because now, again, trying to find a connection with UK, with the Brexit, you lost the opportunity to have the Next Generation EU funds. The Next Generation funds are given to the countries, first of all, to close the gap between the weaker and the stronger. That is the reason for which my country got a lot of money, potentially got a lot of money, 220 billion. Then there is a rule, which is an internal rule, which is 40% of the investment go to South. And the rest of the remaining 60% go to the, not to the other, to the, I mean, to the territory, according sometimes they go directly, I mean, schools, sometimes the municipality, the cities competing, they compete to get that funds. And in this competition, again, the weaker have a different opportunity. So the conclusion is that at the end, 50% of the amount will go to South. They have an opportunity. If they lose the opportunity, it will be a disaster. So we are facing a very crucial period in Italy, because if we cannot close the difference, if cannot tell the people, you cannot become Milan, but I mean, why not why, for instance, universities? We have so many universities in the city, in the country. They can make a business like here in UK, or the fashion. They are looking for artisan in Tuscany, in close to Naples, and so on. So there is an opportunity, but now it's the time to invest European funds.
Thank you. Antonello is over there.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Saya. Is Antonello Guerrero of Repubblica Italy. Just wanted two quick questions. One is, I mean, you mentioned the problem of the prices of the house estates. Do you also think of keeping, of some particular measure to stop? I mean, to try to make still houses affordable? Because one of the problems we have here in London that prices just go up. Well, I mean, now after the Truss disaster, it's a bit changed. But I mean, the problem here in London has always been that prices go up, and up. And for local residents, it's always tougher to get a house. And secondly, you mentioned, because it's very interesting, this parallel with Africa. You mentioned basically, if I got well, that the African migrants are the most difficult to integrate, if I got well. If so, why?
Because most of them, come to Italy through the Mediterranean. In Milan, the biggest community are Chinese, Philippine, Egyptian. Mainly during the COVID, we understood how immigration is fundamental for us. Who work for collect waste, or in the supermarket, or somewhere. So it's fundamental. But the real question is the first one, where I can only solve the problem in the long term through new urban rules, giving the opportunity to wanna invest where we need, avoiding the pay price, reducing the time of bureaucracy, because bureaucracy and red tapes in Italy and even in Milan is tremendous. So I'm working to give them a different entry point. So if you can give me the guarantee you will live 1/3 to social housing, I reduce the time for any permission by 50%. So, but that will take time.
Okay, Mayor, brace yourself. You have 2 questions from Salerno, one after the other. Sara and then Angelo.
Thanks, Mayor. That was really fascinating to hear, you taking us through the journey that Milan has been on, and actually hearing how important immigration has been to the success of Milan. But you said very clearly yourself how fundamental integration policies are to make it work. And that is born, by all the research that we've done at ODI. The evidence says very clearly, if you want to make immigration work, you need to invest in integration. Can you tell us in more detail what Milan has done to make immigration so powerful to the success of the city?
Let's also take another one, otherwise, and then we'll come back. So the first question is, what did it take for integration to work? Angelo?
Another question from, Angelo Martelli, also LSE. Actually, on the Salerno point, a mayor some decades ago now actually used the benchmarking to Barcelona, so as the aspiration, as the narrative, and I think it works well, but up to a certain point, because then there is a bit of it exhausts itself after a while. So one has to be careful in that. My question is, don't you think that actually, because we have changed so many governments, then a mayor like you that has been there, will be there for a while, can act as a powerful counterpart for the global institutions that, platforms like the Mayor's Dialogue, multilateral banks, actually interact with. So isn't this an opportunity actually for you?
Can I ask the second
Theoretically
question?
speaking, it is.
My colleagues that work on global institutions should also think about answers to this question. But Mayor, the integration of migrants and cities taken over.
But first of all, working on the schools, because we have many studies about the quality of our schools, and even the quality of the classroom, depending on the mix between Italians and the immigrants. And it is nice. This is very useful to be studied, because when normally the classroom where there is a mix, let me say, a general mix, 80-20 Italians and foreign born are perfect. While all Italian, it's a disaster. So it's like they do not have, they live a common life, the same ideas, no competition. Second is try to work with the entrepreneurs, creating some easier opportunity for them to find work, do jobs. It is not easy, but again, let me tell you, we are facing a huge problem in finding technical engineers, in finding, but any kind from technical engineers or doctors and even the restaurant bars. So we are telling our son, the fatigue do not exist. And when you ask to someone around the 20s to work during the weekend, in the night, and so on, the Italians say, ciao. So again, that is the reality. Again, we need immigration, of course, we have to face. But again, you know, in Milan we say we have a sort of, we have a sort of second religion. One is Catholic, second is jobs. Now we have more than one one pure religion, but jobs and work is fundamental for us. You're right, and I believe that there are mayor or president of region who want to have different space, who want to give their experience. I mean, it should be the reality in the practical view. I'm not seeing something in that way. So who knows? In my political parts, the left side, now we are going to the new Congress of the Partito Democratico in February. I hope that they will modify 90% of the rules. Otherwise, they're always the same. All the same politician. They are always there. So it's a problem. It's a problem.
One more question at the back. I'm just checking if anybody online wants to find a way to drop a message or something in the chat. I'll be happy to take it, and then we'll take you all for a drink.
And also anyone that is not from the London School of Economics, because I also I'm Francesco from LSE Cities. Sorry, everyone. I have a question. I mean, some of the policies you've mentioned in Milan, but also elsewhere in Europe, on sustainability, especially on climate, on mobility, they are very polarizing, and they are perceived by those who are against, and because they are sometimes, well, very often actually require a change in people's behavior, they are perceived sometimes as something that is done by and for very wealthy urban elites. And we know that going forward in the next 2 or 3 decades, achieving this level of change, not only in how we move, but also in how we eat, how we build our homes, or if we renovate them or not, it's going to be crucial. How do you manage this tension, and how do you make these policies feel that they are for everyone, and it's not only about the rich Milanese cycling to work in Porta Venezia?
It's clear. You're right. There is a definition which is the people of the, come diciamo? No. From one way we say those are radical chic, which is something which is the common understanding.
Those who are in St. Moritz during the COVID.
It is true, but it is not so true for the young people. And we had to work on the young people, because when I was 18, without car, we were an unlucky boy. Now they don't want to buy a car because it is very costly, because it is very complicated, because it is not big to say I do not have a car. So first of all, we have to invest on them. I saw this afternoon that here in London, the mayor Can made some survey on the sometimes based on very simple question. Do you want to have a different environment? And the people say 80% yes. Okay, now I will do in that way. I try to be. I am a completely a complete politician. On the meantime, I wanna be a little bit different. And my message to my fellow citizens is that I told you during my electoral campaign. So I told you during my electoral campaign, I will make the low emission zone, and now I do it. That is another system I'm using. Not simple, but I mean, it is the only way is, let me say, to work on the young generation, and then it's a question of time. So I have 4 years ahead. It's like in my mind I have 8 semesters, and any single semester I have to make a step. If I lose a semester, then I have to recover in 2 semesters. So it is a sort of strategy. But I'm totally committed. I'm totally committed. That I want to be remembered, because sometimes when you making the mayor, being a mayor means that you go home at the night. For me, I normally I'm frustrated because I see, yes, I remember sometime that good I made, but I see so many problems I have to face. But at that time, I tell myself, I want to be remembered in the future like a mayor who transformed a city. First of all, for the international approach. Second, for environment. So I will proceed.
Great. Let me. I don't know. Can somebody see the chat? Because I can't. Okay. I'm Catherine. There's no way I'm going to do that. About integration, it's the same. It's very similar to what Sara said. Is the integration policies of migrants? So I think
There is another one now.
there is another one. That's it. Osama, thank you, Mayor. Osama from the Bosch Foundation. My question is, how do you envision the role of Milan and Freetown in leading the way for other cities of meaningful cooperation?
One of the reasons for which I'm in London is to ask Sadiq to enter in this organization.
You totally are. So that's what we're going to do.
So again, now we are only 20, but I need some big
European
big
cities.
guys like Sadiq, and tomorrow I will ask him to share this association.
Let me just share, maybe, I think it's time for all of us to have a drink. And we have one little surprise for you, Mayor, between you and the drink that I'm sure will give you a lot of energy. I have 2 thoughts of what we just heard. You said that you want to be remembered because of your international work and creating these opportunities for Milan. Angelo's question about the fact that there is an opportunity for mayors, for cities like Milan, London, Paris, this idea that there is a lot of power potentially there and big opportunities for cities of the world to unite and, maybe not take over, but certainly have more of an influence. Your answer was very clear. You said, I don't think so. I can't see it happening. And in fact, this is not something that the left, the progressive, have on their radar. This is really important for all of us that have this idea of really working more on local efforts on global issues, that there is a lot to be done to turn that into reality. And in my view, continuously knocking on the door of international institutions to get a seat at the table for the cities is only one way of achieving it. We need to think a bit more creatively about giving cities voices and power and money. And that's why we're all here today, by the way. This platform is for Mayor Sala at ODI. We will do it with other mayors and to be proactive about creating power behind those efforts and those visions. The other thing, all these questions about the integration of migrants, one of the most interesting things that Mayor Sala, Mayor Akisoyer, and the other mayors, we mentioned Accra, Kigali, Dakar, Durban, that is now very active, Amsterdam, Lisbon, Barcelona. One of the interesting things they do, and in the words of Mayor Akisoyer, she always says, I really appreciate that you care about integrating people in your city, but I really care about people leaving my city. And so rather than always focusing on integration policies in Europe, to really mobilize investment in African cities and for European mayors to be champions and allies of African mayors to attract that investment, which is a very different proposition than just sometimes both either the instrumental view of integrating migrants for the common purpose or the solidarity for almost, to do the right thing. This is all about creating opportunities, visibility, knowledge, the talent in the city of Freetown on textile and on design is overwhelming, and there is so much that we can do. So I'm very proud that's what we do together. We started with Milan, we went through Sierra Leone. We talked a lot about London, and tomorrow we will talk more about London. So we want to leave you with a little memory of Scotland. So today is the 26th of January, which happens to be the day after something called Burns Night. You may or may not know what it is. Burns was Robert Burns, a very important Scottish poet, Barn in fact, and since 1801 his friends started to come together to celebrate his birth, that was on the 25th of January, and the tradition of Burns Night was born. And that normally involves a few things: whiskey, haggis, some poetry. We have none of that, but we do have some drinks. But music is also part of it. And it sounds like the music is happening, so enjoy these bagpipes, which was actually performed by Maggie, who is the coordinator of the Mayor's Dialogue and the person who makes the Mayor's Dialogue work. We found out today that she's an accomplished musician, and so she's going to entertain you for a couple of minutes as you go to have a drink. Thank you, Mayor Sala. Grazie. Non ti chiede di vino.